Hashtag handsome single dad was asleep in seat 8A when the captain asked if any combat pilots were on board. One announcement changed everything on Flight 2317. When former combat pilot Jack Sullivan woke to a desperate call for help at 37,000 feet, he never imagined it would lead him to the second chance he'd stopped believing in. Stay with me until the end to discover how one man's hidden past became the key to saving hundreds of lives, and how the woman who witnessed his courage helped him heal wounds he thought would never close. If this story touches your heart, please like this video and subscribe to see more stories about everyday heroes finding redemption when they least expect it. Jack Sullivan was dreaming of falling when the captain's voice cut through the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I apologize for the interruption, but I need to ask if there are any commercial or military pilots on board, particularly anyone with combat experience. If so, please identify yourself to a flight attendant immediately." The announcement, delivered in a voice too controlled to be casual, rippled through the cabin of the Boeing 737. Passengers exchanged worried glances, the low hum of conversation rising as theories spread from row to row. Jack kept his eyes closed, his body still relaxed against the window of seat 8A despite being instantly, completely awake. 5 years of military training had taught him to wake combat ready, a skill that had saved his life more than once in Afghanistan. Now, on a routine commercial flight from Chicago to Seattle, that same instinct was telling him something was very wrong. The flight attendant's voice came next, closer this time. "Excuse me, folks. Just checking again, are there any pilots on board? Anyone with flight experience?" Jack could feel the eyes of his seatmate on him, a woman who had smiled politely when he'd settled in beside her 2 hours ago before they both retreated into their respective bubbles of travel solitude. He'd been grateful for the quiet, after a week of meetings in Chicago and with an eager 8-year-old daughter waiting for him in Seattle, all he wanted was a few hours of uninterrupted sleep. "Sir?" The flight attendant was standing in the aisle now, her professional smile strained at the edges. "I'm sorry to wake you, but I need to ask if you have any flight experience." Jack opened his eyes, meeting the attendant's gaze. He could read the worry there, carefully contained but unmistakable. Whatever was happening in the cockpit, it wasn't a minor issue. "I'm a pilot," he said quietly, his voice still rough with sleep. "Former Air Force. Combat experience in Afghanistan." The relief that washed over the attendant's face was immediate and profound. "Thank God," she breathed, then quickly composed herself. "Sir, the captain has requested your assistance in the cockpit. If you could come with me, please." As Jack unbuckled his seatbelt and stood, he became aware of the subtle changes in the aircraft's movement, a slight banking to the left, a barely perceptible decrease in altitude. To the average passenger, these might go unnoticed, but to someone who had spent thousands of hours in the air, they were clear signals that the plane had deviated from its flight plan. "What's happening?" asked his seatmate, a woman in her mid-30s with intelligent eyes and a concerned expression. "Probably just a precaution," Jack said with a reassuring smile he didn't entirely feel. "Nothing to worry about." She didn't look convinced, but Jack had already turned to follow the flight attendant toward the front of the plane. As they moved through the cabin, he could feel the weight of stares from other passengers, their expressions ranging from curious to frightened. "The captain and first officer have both fallen ill," the attendant explained in a low voice once they were out of earshot of the other passengers. "Food poisoning, we think. The captain he's not doing well, sir. The first officer is still functional, but she's struggling." Jack nodded, processing this information with the calm efficiency that had once been as natural to him as breathing. "Has she contacted air traffic control?" "Yes, they're aware of the situation. They've cleared a path for emergency landing in Minneapolis, but that's still 40 minutes away." 40 minutes. A lot could happen in 40 minutes at 37,000 feet with an incapacitated flight crew. The flight attendant paused at the cockpit door, entering a security code before stepping aside to let Jack through. The scene inside confirmed his worst fears. The captain was slumped in his seat, pale and sweating profusely, while the first officer, a young woman who looked barely old enough to have completed her training, was visibly fighting to maintain control of both the aircraft and her own nausea. First Officer Chen, she managed to introduce herself without taking her eyes off the instruments. "Thank you for coming. The captain he's not responsive anymore." Jack moved immediately to the captain, checking his pulse and breathing. Both were present but weak and rapid. "He needs medical attention as soon as possible," he said, then turned his attention to Chen. "How are you holding up?" "I've been better," she admitted, her voice strained. "Started feeling sick about 20 minutes ago. Thought I could handle it, but it's getting worse." The captain collapsed 5 minutes after that. Jack made a quick decision. "I need to get him out of that seat. Can you maintain control while I move him?" Chen nodded, her knuckles white on the controls. Jack carefully unbuckled the captain and, with strength honed by years of carrying his daughter to bed after she'd fallen asleep on the couch, lifted the unconscious man from his seat. "I'll take him," offered another flight attendant who had appeared at the cockpit door. Together, they maneuvered the captain out into the galley area, where a makeshift treatment space had been set up. A passenger who'd identified herself as a doctor was already waiting. "Food poisoning?" the doctor asked, immediately checking the captain's vitals. "That's our best guess," the flight attendant confirmed. "Several crew members ate at the same restaurant last night." Jack left them to their work and returned to the cockpit, sliding into the captain's vacated seat with a familiarity that surprised him. It had been 5 years since he'd sat at the controls of any aircraft, 5 years since he'd walked away from flying altogether after the helicopter crash that had taken the lives of 3 of his teammates and left him with a titanium rod in his leg and nightmares that still woke him in a cold sweat. "You're type-rated for commercial aircraft?" Chen asked, her breathing becoming more labored. "C-130s in the Air Force," Jack replied, his hands already moving across the controls, reacquainting himself with the differences between military and civilian aircraft. "And I got my commercial license after I left the service, though I never used it professionally." Chen nodded, relief evident in her expression. "Good enough for me." "I don't think I can," she broke off, swallowing hard against a wave of nausea. "Go," Jack said firmly. "I've got this. Get yourself taken care of." For a moment, Chen looked torn between her duty and her physical distress. Then another wave hit her, and she nodded gratefully. "Minneapolis is expecting us. ATC is on frequency 128.5. They know the situation." As Chen relinquished her seat to another flight attendant who would serve as his makeshift co-pilot, Jack settled fully into the role he'd thought he'd left behind forever. His hands moved across the controls with muscle memory that 5 years of avoidance hadn't erased, checking instruments, confirming their position, establishing contact with air traffic control. "Minneapolis Center, this is Flight 2317. I'm a passenger with flight experience who has taken control of the aircraft. Both pilots are incapacitated. Request vectors for emergency landing, over." The response was immediate. "Flight 2317, Minneapolis Center. We copy your situation and are clearing a path for you. Descend and maintain 28,000 feet, heading 095. Emergency services will be standing by. Can you confirm your flight experience, over?" "Minneapolis Center, this is Major Jack Sullivan, former U.S. Air Force, combat pilot with over 3,000 flight hours, including C-130s. I also hold a commercial license, though it's likely expired." There was a brief pause before the controller responded, his voice noticeably more relaxed. "Copy that, Major Sullivan. We're glad to have you up there. Descend to 28,000 feet at your discretion, and we'll start bringing you in." As Jack guided the aircraft into its descent, the flight attendant beside him, Melissa, according to her name tag, watched with wide eyes. "You make it look so easy," she said. Jack gave her a small smile. "It's like riding a bike." A very complicated, very expensive bike that's carrying 142 people. His attempt at humor seemed to ease some of Melissa's tension. Should I make an announcement to the passengers? They must be worried. Jack considered this. Yes, but keep it simple. Tell them we're diverting to Minneapolis due to a medical emergency with the flight crew, and that a qualified pilot is at the controls. No need to cause panic. As Melissa made the announcement over the intercom, Jack focused on the task at hand. The Boeing 737 was responding well to his commands, its systems more automated and user-friendly than the military aircraft he was accustomed to. Still, bringing a commercial airliner in for an emergency landing wasn't something he'd ever expected to do, especially not after walking away from flying altogether. The memories he'd spent years suppressing threatened to surface: the malfunctioning rotor, the desperate struggle to control the helicopter's descent, the impact that had shattered his leg and killed 3 men he'd considered brothers. He pushed them back down, focusing instead on the present crisis, on the responsibility he now held for every life on this aircraft. For the next 30 minutes, Jack worked closely with air traffic control, following their guidance as they brought him into the approach pattern for Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. The weather was cooperating: clear skies, good visibility, light winds, small mercies that Jack didn't take for granted. Flight 2317, you are cleared for emergency landing on runway 12R. Emergency vehicles are in position. Wind is 080 at 5 knots. Copy that, Minneapolis. Beginning final approach. Jack felt a familiar calm settle over him, the focused clarity that had always come to him in moments of crisis. His hands were steady on the controls as he lined up the aircraft with the runway, adjusting for the crosswind, managing their descent rate. You've done this before, Melissa observed quietly from beside him. Landing? Many times, Jack replied, his eyes never leaving the instruments. Emergency landings in commercial aircraft with no co-pilot? This would be a first. As the ground grew closer, Jack could see the emergency vehicles positioned along the runway, their lights flashing in the afternoon sun. He ran through the landing checklist with Melissa's assistance, confirming that the landing gear was down and locked, that the flaps were properly configured. Flight 2317, you're looking good on approach. Continue as you are. The runway threshold passed beneath them, and Jack felt the familiar sensation of the aircraft settling into ground effect. He eased the nose up slightly, bleeding off speed, then brought the main wheels gently onto the tarmac. The aircraft settled, and he applied the brakes smoothly, bringing them to a controlled stop in the center of the runway. Only when they were fully stopped, with emergency vehicles already approaching, did Jack allow himself to exhale fully. Minneapolis Tower, Flight 2317 is safely on the ground. Requesting immediate medical assistance for the flight crew. Copy that, Flight 2317. Medical teams are approaching your aircraft now. Well done, Major Sullivan. The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Medical personnel boarded the aircraft, quickly transferring the captain and first officer to waiting ambulances. The passengers were eventually deplaned and led to a secure area of the terminal where airline representatives were waiting to assist with their interrupted journeys. Jack found himself the reluctant center of attention, receiving handshakes and thanks from passengers as they disembarked. He accepted their gratitude with quiet humility, uncomfortable with being labeled a hero for simply doing what his training had prepared him to do. As he finally made his way into the terminal, exhaustion beginning to set in as the adrenaline wore off, he spotted a familiar face waiting near the gate, his seatmate from 8A. You lied to me, she said as he approached, though her smile took any sting from the accusation. You said there was nothing to worry about. Jack shrugged, offering a tired smile in return. Seemed like the right thing to say at the time. Well, I suppose I can forgive you, considering you saved all our lives. She extended her hand. I'm Claire Bennett, by the way. We didn't properly introduce ourselves earlier. Jack Sullivan, he replied, taking her hand. Her grip was firm, her gaze direct. "The airline is putting us up in hotels for the night," Claire continued. "They're arranging a new flight crew to take us to Seattle tomorrow morning. I was wondering if you might want to grab dinner later? I feel like I owe the man who saved my life at least a meal." Jack hesitated. Under normal circumstances, he might have declined. Since losing his wife to cancer 3 years ago, he'd kept his social circle small, focused primarily on providing stability for his daughter, Lily. But there was something about Claire, a directness, an intelligence in her eyes, that made him reconsider his usual response. "I'd like that," he found himself saying. "But first, I need to make a call. My daughter is expecting me home tonight, and I need to let her know about the change in plans." Claire nodded understandingly. "Of course. I'll be over by the airline desk when you're ready." Jack found a quiet corner of the gate area and pulled out his phone, dialing the familiar number of his sister-in-law, who was watching Lily during his business trip. "Jack? Is everything okay? Your flight should have landed by now," Karen answered, concern evident in her voice. "There's been a slight change of plans," Jack explained, keeping his tone light for Lily's benefit if she was within earshot. "We had to make an unscheduled stop in Minneapolis. I won't be home until tomorrow." "Minneapolis? What happened?" Jack could hear the worry in Karen's voice and knew he couldn't keep the full story from her. "The pilots got sick. I had to help land the plane." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end. You flew the plane?" "Jack, you haven't flown since." "I know," he interrupted gently. "It's a long story. I'll tell you everything tomorrow." "Is Lily there? Can I talk to her?" There was a rustling sound, and then his daughter's voice came through the phone, instantly lifting some of the weight from his shoulders. "Daddy? Where are you?" "Hey, Lillipad. I'm in Minneapolis. There was a problem with the airplane, so we had to make an extra stop. I won't be home until tomorrow." "What kind of problem?" Lily asked, her 8-year-old curiosity piqued. Jack hesitated, unsure how much to share. "The pilots got sick, sweetheart. But everything's okay now." "Did you have to fly the plane?" Lily asked, surprising him with her intuition. "Like you used to before Mommy died?" Jack closed his eyes briefly, his daughter's directness both painful and refreshing. "Yes, I did." "How did you know?" "Because you're the best pilot ever," Lily stated with the absolute confidence of a child. "That's what Mommy always said." Jack felt a lump form in his throat. "Did she now?" "Uh-huh. She said you could fly anything, even with your eyes closed." "Did you close your eyes, Daddy?" A laugh escaped him, genuine and unexpected. "No, Lillipad. I kept my eyes wide open the whole time." "Good. Aunt Karen says we can have pizza tonight since you're not coming home. Can we have pizza tomorrow too, when you're back?" "We'll see," Jack said, smiling despite the emotional whiplash of the conversation. "Be good for Aunt Karen, okay? I love you, Lily." "Love you too, Daddy. Fly safe tomorrow." As Jack ended the call, he became aware of someone standing nearby. Claire had approached quietly, respecting his privacy but clearly having overheard at least part of his conversation. "Your daughter sounds wonderful," she said with a gentle smile. "She is," Jack agreed, tucking his phone away. "The best thing in my life." "And you really haven't flown since, for a while?" Claire asked carefully. Jack shook his head. "Not since I left the Air Force 5 years ago. Not since my wife got sick." He hadn't meant to share that much, but something about the day's events, the adrenaline, the unexpected return to the cockpit, the brush with danger, had left his usual defenses lowered. Claire seemed to understand, not pushing for more details. "Well, I'm glad you were on our flight today. And I'm even more impressed knowing what it must have taken for you to step back into that cockpit." Jack appreciated her perception and her restraint. How about that dinner? I find I'm suddenly starving. I know just the place, Claire said. The hotel concierge recommended a restaurant within walking distance. Apparently, they make excellent pizza. Jack laughed, thinking of Lily's request. Pizza sounds perfect.